We are, beyond question, the greatest sugar consumers in the world. To explain why these sugars are the most likely suspect, a third of all adults are obese, 2/3 overweight, almost 1 in 7 is diabetic. With the science as it now stands, that sugar is uniquely harmful.
I just closed the last chapter on The Case Against Sugar by Gary Taubes, and I found it pretty jaw-dropping to hear about the marketing endeavours of the sugar industry. From the title alone, The Case Against Sugar is pretty clear that this is yet another book demonising sugar, and it's firmly rooted in the sentiment that sugar is the root of all the diseases of westernisation. I have thoughts. Hi, my name is Sifi and I'm a personal trainer and nutrition coach, and I work very specifically with women who are incredibly frustrated, who have been yo-yo dieting for years. I work with them to improve their physique and restore their metabolism and free themselves of a lot of food fear that comes along from chronic dieting and a lot of misinformation. We work on emotional resilience and exercise and nutrition and mindset to achieve a leaner and stronger body and set of behaviours. Reading this book really got me pondering upon my own views of sugar and what I think of sugar, and also the questions that come in from my coaching clients. So, is sugar bad? Should I avoid it? Can I eat fruit because it's high sugar? Can I eat sugar and still lose weight? And how much sugar can I have? And also there's some questions that come up about sugar cravings, sugar addiction, and what to do with a sweet tooth, especially when you want to lose weight. So if you find yourself pondering these questions, then stick around. I'll explain a little bit about sugar and get these questions answered, and also have 4 or 5 low sugar treats for you. These recipes, they're good. Also, if you like this video and this sort of content, tap the thumbs up and subscribe and let the algorithm, that is YouTube, know I'm here. So I myself have a mega sweet tooth, and I've also got a really weird hobby. I like creepy baking. Anything to do with horror, ghosts, demons, possessions, monsters, it's my jam. And during lockdown, I made this edible Ouija board. And I think watching me create something using sugar is going to be a little bit more interesting than me pointing to a PowerPoint and chatting in your face about sugar. So let's cue the rollback and understand what is sugar before you decide whether you should avoid it or not. Sugar is a component of carbohydrate. All carbohydrates we eat are broken down into blood glucose. Glucose is sugar, and glucose is the body's main and primary source of fuel. A carbohydrate is a chain of sugar molecules all put together. So whether we're eating an apple or toast or a bit of pizza or chocolate, the carbohydrates in these foods are made up of chains of sugar molecules. And these get broken down and cleaved off until they are eventually a single sugar molecule, which we call a glucose. Some of the glucose is used for energy, and then the rest is stored in the liver and muscles for use later on. Stored glucose we refer to as glycogen, and this can be broken down and released into the bloodstream to provide energy between meals or at times when we're not eating, to help regulate blood sugar levels and therefore energy levels. The thing to note is we can only store so much. Once your glycogen stores are complete, your body can convert excess glucose into a type of fat and store them as free fatty acids in your adipose tissue. So simply put, excess glucose can be stored in our body fat when there is no more room left in the muscles and the liver. However, stop. We need to chat more about energy balance and overall calorie consumption, not just carbohydrates. So just later, put a pin in your panic and we'll come back to it. You are not screwed if you eat a cookie. Carbohydrates are in all fruits, all vegetables, all legumes, all grain products, all milk, and carbohydrates can be broken down into 2 main groups, simple and complex. Simple carbs are often referred to as being sugars, and more complex carbs are often referred to as being starches. And now, unless I'm missing something, after years and years of working with general population women who diet, when people are talking about sugar, they tend to be talking about that refined sugar that we put into our brew or we put in cakes, and all the stuff we think of that goes into packaged food, and fruit. Everyone's scared of fruit, right? I think it also doesn't really help to just look at sugar in the form of teaspoons. I mean, I know you've seen it, right? I mean, I sort of get it, and I think it can be helpful when we've got a general understanding of nutrition as a whole, but I also think it can really terrify people out of making really good choices like eating an apple, or even just having a sensible portion of cookies. So let me see if I can get you really clear on what sugar actually is. Sugar is the sweet tasting soluble part of carbohydrate, and they are pretty much in everything if you eat food. And I explain it to my clients to think of sugars, or really simple sugars, as the O's. Simple sugars are made up of 1 or 2 sugar molecules, so it takes less time to break down, digest, absorb and utilize. And complex carbohydrates are made up of longer chains of sugar molecules, and it just takes longer to break down, digest, absorb, and utilize. Just because a food has a sugar in it does not make it bad. Just because a food is a simple sugar doesn't make it bad. Take this apple here, for example. I mean, it's got sugar in it, but it's also got fiber and micronutrients. I think the confusion fear around sugar is really a question of understanding carbohydrates, the naturally occurring sugars and carbohydrates, and the added sugar. Added sugars can also be described as free sugars, and this just simply means that they're not naturally occurring. What did you think of my Ouija board? I call it midlife crisis in lockdown. I also promised you 4 new recipes. I'm going to share these with you as I continue to answer these questions. I really hope you like them. They're really good. If you stick around to the end, I have got a real treat for you. Okay, so where are we? Added sugar. Just because a food has an added sugar doesn't make it bad. Food isn't moralistic. Added sugars are the sugars that are added to food and drinks when they're being processed or prepared, and it's separate from the sugars that are naturally occurring within it. It's not inherently bad or a crime to sweeten food. It tastes nice. Just because a product has a presence of sugar in the ingredients list doesn't make it unhealthy. And I also think there's a lot of fear mongering around it. So look, if you look here, here's a pot of yogurt. There are no added sugars in it, but there is a presence of sugar in it. And this is due to the sugars that are naturally occurring in the milk. And yes, it is a lower fat product, but the sugar is present in it because of the milk and not because it's had a bunch of nasty excess added sugars put in because they took all the fat out. And I think that's a massive misconception that happens with low fat food products. Eat low fat food products, like low fat yogurt if it's your preference. And here we've got the same yogurt, but it's got added sugar in it from the fruit and other sugars. And if you want to identify these sugars, which is a good thing, on the labels they will look like any of these. I think there's like 61 different sugars or names for sugars they put in. The key thing that drives overall fat and weight loss is an energy deficit. And every person on earth has a required energy amount, and we refer to this as your total daily energy expenditure. And this is pretty individual. I have a couple of videos that explain this a bit more in depth, so I will put links below so you can check them out. If you eat more energy than your TDEE, you most definitely will put on weight. And if you eat less than your TDEE, then you will most definitely lose weight. The research is pretty darn conclusive on this. In nutrition, when we're talking about energy, we're really chatting about calories. And sugar is a component of carbohydrate and is pure carbohydrate, which has a calorie amount. So let's say if you have a TDEE of 2,000 calories, if you drop down to 1,500 calories, you'll be in a 500 calorie deficit. And you would most definitely lose weight. You would lose weight if you were eating your 1,500 calories of chicken, rice, and broccoli, or if you were eating your 1,500 calories from cheese sandwiches, a packet of Walker's Crisps, and a Kit Kat. I mean, 93 teaspoons of sugar is about 1,500 calories, and like 900-ish grams of chicken is also about 1,500 calories. Now, these two are very fast extremes. I am not recommending you go out and you eat pure sugar or pure chicken. The point I'm trying to drive home here is that it is the overall calorie deficit that drives weight loss. And if you are maintaining a calorie deficit and you are eating sugar in any form, be it from apples or Oreos, or a couple of teaspoons of cane sugar in your brew, weight loss is not only absolutely possible, it is most assured. There are numerous studies that show when overall calories and macros are equated, high sugar versus low sugar doesn't cause a difference in fat loss. Your deficit is the determinant of fat loss. Sugar in and of itself is not a lipogenic substrate compared to other non-fibrous carbohydrate sources. Huge amounts of caveats here, and just so I don't get strawmanned, I am not saying go out and eat tons of sugar. I'm just saying that yes, you can most definitely eat some sugar and still lose weight. There are certainly recommendations. I recommend that you look at the World Health Organization or the American Heart Association, and here's also what the NHS UK recommend for free sugar consumption. I don't teach my clients just to look at one component of nutrition in isolation. I teach my clients to understand about food and how it works in relation to us, and also how to build a diet that's balanced for them. And this takes into consideration preference, satiety, specific physique goals, budget, energy, and their overall lifestyle. I have some clients that eat a far higher carbohydrate diet and therefore consume by default more in the way of fiber and sugar. But because we're looking at other factors such as overall energy needs as well as the other two major components of nutrition, fats and proteins, in conjunction with carbohydrate intake, it takes in a far more rounded view. I think to a degree in a lot of cases it does, but not because sugar has a nasty fattening special sorcery around it. It's just because it comes down to satiety and caloric density. Sugary foods taste extremely nice. The problem isn't eating pure cane sugar. I don't think anyone finds that particularly appealing, to eat it by the spoon from the jar. Sugar becomes really appealing when we combine it with things like fat and salt, like cake batter. Now you're talking. Cookies, biscuits, cakes, confectionery, all the processed goodies we also get in the shop or can even make in our own home. These hyperpalatable foods are extremely delicious, and they're marketed to every single one of our pleasure-seeking senses. And they're also incredibly easy to consume and quickly a lot of calories without feeling even that full. And that can make it harder for some people to control. So you team this up with any woman who is regularly denying herself any sweet treats or highly palatable foods, with an extreme diet and a brain that is hardwired to eat its fill, then there you've got a recipe for disaster. And I think this is where people then start concerning themselves about sugar addiction. If sugar addiction is real, we don't really know. I also don't think it's particularly helpful to tell those who feel like they've got an addiction to sugar that their feelings aren't valid. I understand that as a former binge eater, it feels really real. And this is when I don't really care what the literature has to say. The fact is there is an issue there and we need to address it. Here's what the American Society of Addiction Medicine states as the definition of addiction. And whilst I think a lot of us can resonate with what is being said and bring it to our relationship with sugar, I don't think many of us are going to the lengths of eating straight cane sugar from out the bag to get a fix. I do resonate with the idea of food addiction much more, and there are tools out there to help identify food addiction, more specifically the Yale Food Addiction Scale. However, from the small amount of research I've done, looking at the questions and looking at the studies of its efficacy in diagnosing food addiction, it just looks to me like it's a really good tool for identifying an eating disorder, more specifically a binge eating disorder. And here's my take on this. Certain things in this life are pleasurable, so sex, food. There's a high drive to partake in these things because if they weren't pleasurable, we wouldn't do them. So with that in mind, we already have a drive to seek out pleasure. And we live in a world where we have constant access to hyperpalatable foods, and they are as delicious as they are well marketed. And these hyperpalatable foods tend to be the things that get taken off the table when a woman wants to diet. And I'm not just talking about sweet stuff here, I'm talking about things like bread, potatoes, pasta. These foods get restricted and they're turned into these really novel and naughty vices, and somehow we feel that we should be living a life of total abstinence. And then of course we break down and we eat them and we have a physical response to eating them. They make us feel good temporarily, and then of course there's the guilt and the shame, the promise that we'll never do it again. We have that last supper eating where you eat as much as possible because you know you're never going to eat it again, and then we start restricting them again, and so the dance goes on and on. And the thing that's making these foods seemingly more addictive, subsequently needing more of them and in larger amounts, is the inconsistent access we have to them because we put such limits on them. Abstaining should always be part of the healing process from any addiction. However, abstaining from all palatable foods is just more restriction, and it really plays into the good food, bad food dance. And what we know of restriction is that it only exacerbates binge eating or overconsumption later on. And whilst I think there is a place to preliminary remove a more troubling or triggering food if they just feel too compelling right then in the moment, I simply cannot advocate for removing foods from the diet completely. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that we should be normalizing all food rather than eliminating any foods. And this is part of the work of creating a lifestyle we want. Whatever we do for the most part has to be sustainable, right? Otherwise it's just another bullshit diet. So start with actually allowing you to indulge in your sweet tooth, and often. And when you start allowing yourself foods without the novelty and without the restriction and without building it up into something that's just so big and so all-consuming and powerful, that's really the work of change. But I understand this is really difficult, and starting off to do this is really difficult. And this is why I have clients eating free sugar containing foods as part of their overall approach to food. And when I can be part of the journey of facilitating this reconnection with these hyperpalatable foods, and we can eat them in a way that is inclusive of their overall diet and approach to healthy lifestyle, all I find they do is lose weight with far less episodes of out of controlled or frenzied eating, and much less jumping off of a diet from hitting the switch every time they eat something that's nice. Hyperpalatable foods absolutely can be part of your weight loss program. And speaking of hyperpalatable foods, as promised, I've got a little treat for you. I have actually put together a download with all these recipes with the full ingredients list and the method, and also the macros and the calorie count for each recipe. And for those of you who track, you'll find everything already uploaded into MyFitnessPal for you, so you don't have to add their own recipes into your library. It's just there ready to go. I'll put the link down below and you can download it completely for free. I hope you enjoy them, and let me know if you make them. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you join me again next time. Click like if you like this video, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye.